Are we missing anybody? Oh, Amy, correct. Yes, one more. Meeting, okay. We'll begin, and I'm sure Amy will join us momentarily. Okay, so I will call the meeting to order at 9:15 a.m. Good morning, everyone, and happy spring. So welcome to our fellow council members, and welcome to all of our college staff that are present today. I'd also like to welcome our legal counsel, Rebecca Durkin. And as a reminder, for those of you who have not yet had a chance to do that, to help observers distinguish our roles, I want to ask that council members include their designation, so public member or ND, along with their name. So if everyone who hasn't yet could please take a moment and do that, I would appreciate it. Thank you. If you need assistance, you can just message in the chat and one of the staff can help you with that. We will be joined today by Barry Sullivan for items 5.1 and 5.2 on the agenda. And I want to remind all of our council members that our council meeting today is being live streamed via YouTube. So in this regard, I want to acknowledge and welcome registrants and other guests who have registered to watch the live feed of today's meeting. Before we begin today, I would like to take a moment to remind everyone of the college's mission and vision. Our mission, the college's mission, is to regulate naturopathic doctors to ensure safe, ethical, and competent care for the people of Ontario. And our vision is to achieve and maintain public confidence in the practice of naturopathy through excellence in regulation. These, along with the college's values, can be found on the college's website and in our Smartsheet references. So as we carry out our business today, let's keep these in mind. Page 4 of your meeting package, we have included the college's land acknowledgement as developed by the Governance Committee. So if you've not already done so, review the land acknowledgement as an indicator of the council's commitment to peace, friendship, and respect of our Indigenous peoples. Page 5 of part 1 of your meeting package, you will find the updated meeting norms for video conferencing as adopted by council. These guidelines are designed to foster a respectful and supportive environment for all participants. And rather than reviewing each one, I just want to highlight 2 reminders. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. And if you need to step away or turn off your camera, please just simply pop a message in the chat to let us know. And reminder, my preference is you raise your virtual hand for any questions or if you would like to speak, and raise your physical hand for any motions, consensus, or votes. To raise your physical hand, click the heart icon at the bottom toolbar, not the up arrow beside it, and then click raise hand on the box that pops up. Okay, does anyone have any questions regarding the meeting norms? Okay, thank you. We will adopt those for our meeting today. We're also going to use the high five process if we need to for seeking consensus in the form of an online poll. When we use the video platform, that's preferred over raising hands. And you'll find on page 8 of part 1 of your meeting package an outline of this method. So quick reminder, 5 means that you fully support the direction that we're discussing, and a score of 1 means that you are strongly opposed, and then there's the varying degrees in between. Okay, let's move on to our consent agenda, which is the next item. The consent agenda can be found on page 9 through 83 of part 1 of your meeting package. The consent agenda includes things such as several different documents, minutes, reports, ratifications, and some informational items that are presented as approval as one item on the agenda, which improves efficiency of our meeting rather than going through each individual item. If there is anything in the consent agenda that a council member wants to discuss, we can do that. You just let us know and we will pull it out and put it into the main agenda. Is there anything in the consent agenda that anyone would like to discuss today? Not seeing any hands. Okay, so we will call for a motion. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Thank you, Paul. And a second, thank you, Jacob. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. The motion is carried. Denny. Oh, physical hands for motions. Okay, you can lower. Sorry. Is that a question, Denny? I'm confused.
No, I was scratching my face.
Okay,
Sorry.
your hand is raised.
Where? How did that happen? Okay,
Oh, it must mimic your movements. Okay, thank you.
sorry.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the draft main agenda, which was circulated with the meeting materials. It can be found on page 3 of part 1 of your package. Are there any other? We haven't moved anything from the consent agenda. Is there any other item that needs to be added to today's agenda? And I'll look to staff as well. I don't see any hands. Okay. So there are no items. Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Thank you, Dean, first, and a second, Amy. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. The motion is carried. Okay. Also included in part 1 of your meeting materials package, beginning on page 84, is the summary of the annual conflict of interest questionnaires completed by council. As a reminder, these are provided as part of increased transparency and accountability initiatives, and they also align with the College Performance Measure framework. The actual forms in this summary are available on the college's website. The purpose of summarizing and disclosing these forms is to ensure that all council members and observers are aware of any declared conflicts and to provide an opportunity for questions if any disclosures appear to have been missed. It's important to note that this disclosure process does not replace the individual fiduciary duty of each council member to identify and declare conflicts of interest whenever they arise. A reminder that having a conflict of interest is not an indication of wrongdoing. It's simply an acknowledgement that the integrity of council's deliberations and decision-making is of the utmost importance. Registrants and members of the public must be able to trust that all deliberations and decisions are made solely in accordance with the college's mandate to serve and protect the public interest. Okay, at this time, if any council members have any conflicts of interest with any of the items on today's agenda, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, not seeing any conflicts of interest noted. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, item 4.1, is the report of the council chair. A copy of that is on page 86 of part 1 of your package. I'll just point out a few highlights before I open it up for questions. So from January to February of 2026, the vice chair and I met on several occasions, including one meeting with legal counsel as a follow-up to our in-camera session from council's January council meeting. Also individually, I met with the OA&D chair, and Andrew and I met jointly with the OA&D CEO and chair. As well, Andrew and I continue to remain in regular contact correspondence, and he has been a tremendous support with me and my role as chair. Do any council members have any questions regarding my report? Okay, may I have a motion to accept the report of the council chair, please? Lisa first, Denny second. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Motion is carried. Okay, next item is 4.2. Can be found beginning on page 87 of part 1 of your meeting materials package. So at this time, I would like to invite Andrew Parr, our CEO, to present the report on regulatory operations at February 28, 2026. Andrew?
Thank you, Brenda. Good morning, everybody. Just as a reminder, the purpose of this report is to assure the council that the regulatory responsibilities of the college are being undertaken by the college. This is a key part of your oversight responsibilities. I have provided highlights of the report, and that's found on page 87, as the chair had mentioned, and the detailed report follows at page 90. I won't go through all of the details of that report, there will be an opportunity for some questions. Just a couple of things that I would note for you. With respect to registration, in addition to what you see in the report, just to note for the council that the annual renewal process began on or about February 14th, and the deadline for submission of the annual fees in the information return is March 31st. As a part of the annual information return, data relating to the number of controlled acts performed by registrants, the size of their patient base, and the number of patients seen will be included, and that's a part of our ongoing risk-based regulation program. We look forward to being able to update that. This will be the third year that we've collected that data, so it's going to be a very good indicator of shifts in practice as we see it from this point going forward. Although not reported in the regulatory operations report, the college began collecting data relating to the therapeutic prescribing standard in February. So in 2025, all registrants who have met the therapeutic prescribing standard were asked to or required to collect data relating to the number of prescriptions that they've issued, drugs that they've dispensed, compounded, and sold, as well as the administrations of substances by inhalation and by injection. So we've asked them to report by mid-March. I'm really delighted to say that the number of people that we're now down to, I believe it's about 13 individuals that we're working with to get that data submitted out of about 590 registrants of the college. So very good reporting from our registrants, and we're delighted to see that. This data, I think, is going to be extremely interesting, not only to council and to the college, but also to our registrants. I can see some very interesting pieces of information coming out from the data already, and I think it will be quite helpful to us in our role of overseeing how this works, what the impact of these controlled acts are on patients, and if there's any risks. So yeah, Jeremy just noted that there are 10 outstanding as of this morning. So again, a message to our registrants. Thank you for being so willing to provide this. It was quite a point of consternation when we first launched it, but the compliance level is there, and we've had several discussions with registrants about the importance of the data, and we look forward to releasing it publicly to the profession, to council, and to the public. So that's really the highlights that I would provide verbally to you. Any questions that you have, I'd be happy to respond to those.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anyone have any questions for Andrew on the report? Erin.
I just am interested to know if collecting the therapeutic prescribing data is something that we can expect or want to decide to continue in perpetuity, or is this like a window of an experiment and maybe we don't have to do this forever?
Excellent question, and I'll say to you what I've said to a couple of registrants who have written to me. I'm really big on that what we do has to provide value in terms of our role in the public interest. And if we find that the data is not providing value, then we'll stop collecting it. I think it's going to take a couple of years, so I would anticipate 2, 3, maybe 4 years. And I would caution that the purpose of risk-based regulation is not just to see it as a snapshot today, what's happening, but to be able to identify trends as things change. And so we may see a level of prescribing today with low amounts of adverse reactions. And that's frankly what the data so far seems to be telling us. But in 2 years, we may suddenly see a shift and that there's a large number of adverse reactions, which causes us to ask the question, well, why? And what can we do to reduce that? That's really what risk-based regulation is looking for. Is not just what's in the data initially, but over time, what trends we see in that. But again, if there is nothing in here of any value to us as an organization, whether that's for the council or for the college, I'll be the first to say, let's dump it. We've got enough on our plates. Registrants have enough on their plates. If they don't need to do it, let's not make them do it.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question for Andrew on his report? Not seeing any hands. If I may, I'm going to step aside from chair and ask my question. Andrew, with regards to occurrence reports, I believe those are currently just for IVIT procedures right now. They don't include any prescribing incidents. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So it only applies to IVIT at this time. Okay.
That's correct. And Brenda, it's a great question, actually, and something we contemplated, but it is regulatory in terms of the IVIT, so it's in the inspection program regulation. It would likely need a regulation change if we wanted to add that in terms of therapeutic prescribing. I think for a council, that's something for you to keep in the back of your mind as we start to look at the data over the next year or two, and to see if that is something that would be beneficial in terms of our public interest mandate. But right now, we didn't feel that just inserting it in a bylaw would be sufficient enough for us to warrant that kind of a report. Okay,
thank you. So adverse effect reporting right now is simply through the I believe it's the ministry has that set up online for anyone has an adverse effect with a drug. They can report that online, but it doesn't necessarily go through us. Okay.
That's correct. Yes.
And the reason I ask is we're seeing today, presented later today, let's add another drug to our prescribing options. If we're continuing to add drugs, is there a safety piece we need to have in place, i.e. the reporting of any adverse effects? And does council need to consider that, as you said?
Wow, another excellent question. Yes, I think there's something that you as council and we as your support team need to consider, and I think that's what the ministry would look at as, as we decide or need to change the regulatory the authorizations. Are there other regulatory components that we need to augment? So you could suggest in future that if there were, significant new drugs added, that there might be a need to do that adverse reporting, so that would be your mechanism of monitoring. And I guess I would say that because keeping in mind the risk-based regulation information's data, it's not individuals' circumstances, whereas in IVIT, they're giving us the individual circumstance where it occurred, and then that's reviewed by the inspection committee. So it's a much more robust individual occurrence review, whereas again, we're just looking at overall on data. What's the data telling us in terms of patient safety and trending in terms of whether there's any changes in that area.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions for Andrew? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you again, Andrew. Thanks for such a thorough and informative report. I think the depth and the clarity of the information is a true reflection of the strong leadership and diligence that goes into running the college. Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the report on regulatory operations at February 28, 2026 from the CEO? Aaron first, thank you. And may I have a second? Jacob, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. The motion is carried. Okay. Item 4.3, our next item, can be found beginning on page 100 of part 1 of your meeting materials package. At this time, I would like to invite Erica Logalies, Deputy CEO of Registrant and Corporate Services, to present the variance report and unaudited financial statements at Q3.
Thanks, Brenda. Good morning, everyone. So again, just a few quick highlights from the report. I won't read the entire thing to you. In our statement of financial position at the end of Q3, the college has a surplus of just under $672,000. The total for accounts receivable is just over $375,000, of which $212,000 is monies owing for the payment program, with the last deduction for the 2025 fiscal year being January 2026. Our prepaid account has a balance of just over $39,000, of which $15,000 is the carrying cost of last month's rent. Looking at the statement of operations, at the end of the quarter, the college had exceeded its year-to-date budgeted targets by 2%, with additional revenue in Q4 estimated around $125,000. We are anticipating meeting budgeted revenue targets by in excess of 2 to 3%. At the end of Q3, there were 2 expense line items that had exceeded budgeted amounts. These were legal fees, discipline, and hearings. For legal fees discipline, there are 2 current active appeal files. We also had preparatory work for an uncontested hearing. In hearings in Q3, the college had a pre-hearing conference, and again, the 1 full day for the uncontested hearing. Finally, you'll see that there were some projections in the report. So we are anticipating ending the year with a deficit of around 343,000, which is approximately 209,000 less than was initially anticipated when the budget for the 2025 fiscal year was presented to you last March. And at that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Erica. Any questions for anyone with regards to the financial statements or statement of financial position as well that Erica presented? Everybody's pretty quiet. Okay. I was going to ask Erica a question, but she answered them all in her presentation, so I don't have any questions left. Okay, thanks, Erica. I appreciate you walking us through the variance report and the unaudited financial statements, and we appreciate all the work that goes into preparing and presenting that information. So may I have a motion to accept the variance report and the unaudited financial statements at Q3 as presented? Paul, thank you. May I have a second? Dean, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Motion is carried. Denny, your hand popped up again. I'm guessing that's just in response to you raising your hand. Okay. Monica, may I confirm? Okay, we confirm that Barry is in attendance. Okay, we're now going to move on to item 5, the Council Governance Policy Confirmation section of our agenda. So I would like to welcome Barry Sullivan, our public representative, to our meeting and ask him to lead Council through the governance policy confirmation process. Welcome, Barry. Barry, you're still muted. Barry, you are muted. There we go. Thank you.
Hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. And good morning, everyone. Looks like a larger group than usual. That's good to see. Anyway, we're here to do our review of the results of our detailed review of the governance policies GP 19 to GP 36. Monica, could you put up our presentation, please? Okay. So as Brenda says, from the agenda as usual, item number 5, 501 and 502. So first of all, 501, policy issues arising. So having heard just now the reports from Brenda and Andrew and Erica, have council members identified any issues arising from the information presented relative to any of the governance policies? Are there any comments or concerns from a policy standpoint? Brenda, I don't see everyone, so I imagine you can.
Yes, and I just raised my hand for you, Barry, so I have a comment, I guess.
Good.
On reviewing, I do want to say with regards to ELO2, number 1B, part 1, talking about the college will govern itself and its programming to ensure adherence to the principles of transparency and accountability. I found that the reports were very transparent, both from Andrew and Erica. They were incredibly transparent and accountable. So for me, that's a positive. I'm seeing that we're reinforcing, not that there's any concern, just comment that we're reinforcing what's expected in our policies.
Excellent. Anything further? No?
I'm not seeing any hands, Barry.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go on to 502. Detailed review of governance process policies, part 2. I won't go through all of these because, of course, everybody has gone through them just recently in detail. So you know what they're all about, but it's GP 19 to 36 again, with probably the last maybe 6 policies being the most recent, the newest policies. So as we said, everybody's done their review, both council members and committee members. And this was in keeping with the new GP 36 governance policy monitoring and review process policy. Everybody was asked to complete, to do the review and submit any comments, questions, requests for clarification, grammatical changes, etc. So we did get quite a few questions, comments, etc. A number of grammatical change suggestions. Also, we've made a few minor grammatical changes like that would maybe apply to every policy, but that's, I don't know if they necessarily show up on the documents that we have, but they were made. And in terms of responses, we had 14, council members 7, governance committee members 5, and then there were 2 that are hybrids, both council and governance committee membership. So that would make 9 council members responded and 7 governance committee, which is good. I think that's more than in the past. All the feedback that we received was reviewed by the governance committee at the last meeting on March 13th. And the proposed amendments, grammatical changes and so on, were sent out, and they should be in your package that you receive for the meeting. Okay. So as I said, we do have a summary of the proposed amendments and grammatical changes that we'll look at in a minute. But I thought there weren't a lot of items to bring forward separately for discussion, but I did add one, and it was about GP 20, commitment to strategic planning. And it was just a rhetorical question, really, regarding one of the statements. Council will dedicate a portion of its resources to focus on the long-term goals of the college. What constitutes a portion of its resources? Time, budget, external consultant, etc. And we did talk about that in the committee. And yes, of course, there would be financial costs incurred through the strategic planning exercise that might be undertaken. The costs would have to be identified and allocated through the budgetary planning process, I imagine. And again, in terms of the strategic planning, the end statements, EO1 and priorities EO2, are the product of the council's strategic planning process. And I also note that on the agenda today are the operational plans for 26-27. And I'm sure that they will, continue to address the end statements and policies, or priorities rather. I don't know, does anybody, any staff want to comment on the resources required for strategic planning? More than what I've just commented on? Andrew?
Barry, I can just add that when we anticipate strategic planning, we will engage with the chair and vice chair and really talk about what the process is. If they want to have that as an item that we can have a conversation with council. Strategic planning can be as simple as the council has an unfacilitated conversation about the plan, or we can have a facilitated conversation to confirm or reconfirm what might already be there, or what we could do what we did in the last go round, which was a more from fundamentals where we do engagements with all of our system partners and interested parties and really get feedback and input on where we're going. That would be the dialogue first with the chair and vice chair, and then with the council if they want to bring it before council. That will determine what resources would be necessary. The process that we might undertake would be determinant of what amount of the resources would be included or required to support strategic planning.
Right on. Thank you. And I believe the last fairly formal exercise on doing the looking at the strategic plan was in January 2023. I think that's about right. Also, we have a proposed amendment to this policy that we'll look at in a second with respect to the frequency that we would look at this. Are there any other comments or questions?
I'm not seeing any hands, Barry.
Okay. Let's move on, Monica. So anyway, in the comments, we always like to point out any positive comments, and this was a good one. This exercise is very effective in confirming the organization is up to date, effective, and progressive in its management, administration, and governance. That was from a council member, I believe. So thank you. So any further comments or questions on those policies 19 to 36 before we move on?
I'm not seeing any hands, Barry.
Okay. So we'll now look at the amendment package that was provided in your materials for the meeting. Okay, Monica, do you have the summary report? Okay, I don't think we necessarily need to go through, through this report in detail or each individual policy because they're summarized here, and also the council has had a chance to review these as part of their package in advance. But just a comment about this summary. Thanks to Monica and Melissa for making it up. And it was prepared in quite short order, as I believe we had to get it out, or they had to get it out as part of the package to council the same day of our governance committee meeting when we reviewed all the feedback. So that was quite a short turnaround. And I'm hoping that we're going to look at the timelines and the scheduling of our meetings to allow for this review, to make sure there's sufficient time for both preparation for the governance committee discussions as well as for council's discussions today or at council meetings. So just to point out on GP20, commitment to strategic planning. As I mentioned earlier, we're proposing to change this statement. At least every 5 years, the council will consider whether it needs to dedicate a portion of its resources to focus on long-term goals. That was 3 years, and we're proposing a change to 5 years. Is there any discussion on that?
Does anyone have any questions about that?
Question?
No, I'm not seeing any hands, Barry.
Okay, and then there was the rest of the proposed changes that we're making, GP 21, some wording changes. GP 26. And GP 29, and I did have one further change. If you look at GP 29 here, and if you look at confidential information, we took out the word stakeholders and we replaced it with system partners and interested parties. However, on the next line, you'll see that we left in stakeholder lists. So what I'm proposing is that we amend this further to say registrant and system partners and interested parties lists, to remove the second stakeholders. So that would be a further amendment there. Any comments or questions on that?
Thank you, Barry. I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, so then we have GP 30. We made a change there with respect to who is providing training. And then we have a list of all or most of the grammatical changes that we've made to the policies. And all of these changes, by the way, are highlighted on the actual policies themselves that Monica had first put up on the screen, but I don't think we need to go through all of those separately. Unless anyone has further question.
Does anyone have any questions for Barry? Barry, I just have one. On, I believe it's page 126, we have GP 32. I know that we're correcting the title in a number of them. I just wanted to include, so GP 32, we're going to change that to governance. And GP 31 isn't in this package. I assume we're also going to do, these aren't policy changes. This is just adding a letter in. So I'm just assuming that we're going to do that as well.
Exactly, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So having said that, just one more further amendment I wanted to point out in the grammatical changes under GP 32. Monica, if you could go back to that in the summary. Page 110. Okay, so we've updated the committee title in this policy from the Risk Committee to Audit, Finance, and Risk Committee. This is a very minor thing. I believe it's the Finance, Audit, and Risk Committee. So we'll just make that further change if that's acceptable to everyone. Okay, so if there aren't any further questions or comments, could we have a motion to approve the proposed amendments and changes as amended? Brenda?
Okay. Thank you, Barry. So, and just to confirm, any other questions for Barry before we proceed to the motion? Okay. So as Barry requested, may I have a motion to adopt the recommended policy changes as amended? Jacob first. May I have a second? Denny, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. The motion is carried. Thanks so much, Barry, for joining us today, taking the time to present for us. We really appreciate your contribution to our meeting today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next time.
It's always a pleasure, and thanks again for all the great comments and questions and suggestions that people submitted.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Okay. Let's move on to number 6, regular business. We're going to do item 6.1, which can be found beginning on page 140 of part 1 of your meeting materials package. At this time, I want to invite back Andrew to present the draft operational plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the Chair noted, the briefing is on page 140. The plan itself is starting on page 145 of part 1 of your materials. Overall, we don't believe that there are significant changes necessary to the operations on a go-forward basis. And we're still working within the 2023 to 2027 strategic plan that was set by the Council. If you asked for a particular theme of our approach, I think our theme would be to slow down and to remain focused on the primary task of regulating the profession. There's always a great deal of emphasis put on strategic activities and the desire to move to particular outcomes, and those really do need to remain top of mind. However, when it comes to a regulator, there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes if you focus solely on where we want to go, because there's certain things that we are required to do, which is to regulate the profession. And I've had conversations with the chair and vice chair, also the CEO, the council and CEO review panel. So you're going to hear this probably several times today. It's very important that the strategic projects that we engage in don't interfere with or prevent us from being able to be efficient and effective in our regulatory requirements. So really, I think we're trying to make sure that we keep our focus clear on doing the job of public protection, patient safety, while still keeping an eye on where we'd like to be. Projects like risk-based regulation, if we've learned anything over the last 3 years, is that these programs take time to establish. We need to establish what the data sets are that we're looking for. We need to collect that data, and then we need time to be able to look at the data over several years to really see what's going on out there. So I think it's really important that we bear in mind that one single set of data won't give us everything we want with risk-based regulation. And over time, that data set may need to be altered. We could theoretically expand it, or we could theoretically reduce it because it's not giving us anything that's valuable. Risk is not, as I said this earlier, and Erin kind of, when she posed the question, really foreshadowed what I was going to say to you here, which is risk isn't only about what's happening today, but it's also about what's happening over time as things shift, as practice changes, and the change or the impact on risk could be both either positive or negative. So we need to keep that in mind. So I think that overall, what we're suggesting is that, we had created the working group on identification and mitigation of patient harm, which has not been fully operationalized. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily effective, because that group won't be able to be entrenched in the data. I think what we really need to do is we have a program that's going to be looking at the data that's coming in, and we're going to have to take a bit more of a looking at particular issues as they're arising. And I think we then need to reach out to, whether it's our system partners or interested parties, to talk about what we are seeing, get some shared understanding of what we may be seeing, and then what kind of approaches. So rather than a formal process, I think it has to become more data driven. And I think that's going to make us more, well, we'll all roll our eyes with this word, but nimble in terms of our approach to managing the risk that we may see in terms of practice and impact on patients. So overall, what we're suggesting here is, and coincidentally with what the policy team has talked about, is looking at the strategic initiatives and slowing those down a bit, extending that time frame, by a couple of years. We were in a 3 or 4 year plan, and we may need 4 or 6 years to be able to make some accomplishments. One of the things that when Barry was talking, I was tempted to say was, strategic planning, looking at long-term goals aren't 4 years or 5 year windows. They typically are much longer windows. So I think that's where there's a bit of a push-pull in terms of strategic planning in the not-for-profit sector is something that is deemed to be done every several or more years. 5 years is a nice time frame, but true long-term strategic objectives typically take longer than 5 years. So I think as we, get towards the end of this process and start looking ahead, we need to make sure that our goals match the time frame. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is that the goals that we wanted to achieve in your strategic plan and how we've operationalized that are not things that can be done in the time frame that the plan is set out. So there's a bit of a mismatch there. This will not all be resolved today, nor do I suggest that it needs to be, or is there a major issue for us to consider. But I think as the council moves forward, this is something for us to keep in mind and to begin looking at, well, how do we marry all of these competing interests so that we have strategic goals, that they are achievable in a meaningful time frame? And are there two goals? Are there interim goals and long-term goals? And I think we need to start thinking about those kinds of approaches to ensure that we don't take away from what our actual full job is, which is to regulate. And we've talked that typically for our college takes up to about 90% of our resources. So that's just regulation. And then there's the strategic initiative. So what we're suggesting here today is we're going to slow down a little bit. We want to do the job. We want to do it well. We want to do it right. But we want to make sure that we accomplish our regulatory requirements. So it's a little bit of we're going to take a deep breath. We're going to continue to carry on, but we're not going to run. We're going to walk quickly. I will open it up for comments. All of those mixed analogies for you.
Thank you, Andrew. Jacob, are you not able to use your virtual hand?
I've never done it. Maybe next time I'll try it.
Click the heart at the bottom and then click raise hand.
A heart. Oh,
Yes.
Okay. What's that? Okay. All right.
Go ahead.
So who eventually analyzes, interprets the data? Like, do we bring in do you do it, or is there a separate group that comes in? Because I imagine there must be some kind of expertise to going through the data and figuring out, what it means and what to do with it.
I think that there's a certain degree of that can be done internally to the college with people that are knowledgeable about the practice. So if we look at the regulatory programs area, we have its manager is a former member of council and a naturopathic doctor, so they have a good link into what the practice is about. I think some of the data, a lot of the data can be interpreted, but there may be a need to bring in external expertise. And I think that option is certainly there for us to bring in consultants to help us, dig into the data. It's not in the plans right now for us to do. Again, I think you need sufficient data to be able to retain someone to go into the data and help us identify things that we may be missing. I hope that helps. It's just there's some stuff that I think will be clear to us, and then others that we may need some expertise to look at, all of the various statistical analysis that would be undertaken by someone who has much more skill in that area.
And sorry, just as a follow-up to that same question, so who decided initially what data to collect? What questions to ask, how to phrase them, etc.
The senior staff did. We were looking at what we needed in terms of evidence of, what we're trying to get a window on what the profession's doing within its patient base. So, we know there are controlled acts, so it made sense to ask them what kind of controlled acts that are being undertaken. The legislation, the regulation told us what we needed to collect for IVIT. That was essentially extrapolated onto the therapeutic prescribing data because we felt that if it was relevant for IVIT, it was relevant certainly for injections and for prescribing. But again, some of this is things that will change over time as we get more experience in it.
Thank you. Jacob, that answers your question?
Yes.
Thank you. Maria.
I think Jacob brought up some really good questions there in terms of statistical thinking. So that's really awesome. I just wanted to provide a comment that I love to hear the word data come up. And I think you're completely right that if you want to be more nimble or concrete, you need to kind of dig into the numbers and the data. And that process is not as straightforward as it sounds. And there's a lot of looking into things and then realizing you have something's potentially missing and trying to determine associations that aren't confounded by other potential variables and things like that. So it is lengthy process, as you say. So I agree with you that the strategic plan probably has to be expanded a little bit in terms of time. But I think the value that we will get from doing so and looking at the numbers themselves will help a lot when it comes to risk-based regulation, as you said. So I'm completely on board and I'm happy to hear all of this stuff for the operational plan.
If two comments, if I may. Thank you. That means a great deal to me, coming from someone who is in the field of statistics, and so we may bend your ear from time to time, Maria. But I think hearing that from someone who's I would classify as an expert in that area is, I think, very important to us. Gives us some reasonableness to what we're doing. The other thing I'll tell you is that I've recently had some meetings with our colleagues in the ministry, and quite coincidentally, the question of data has come up in those discussions as well. And the ministry has noted that, data is becoming increasingly important for the decisions that are being made within government. And that data could be, from a patient safety, patient experience perspective, or it could be from an economic perspective in terms of impact on professions, impact on patients. So there's a lot of different data sources, if you will, that the ministry will consider. But I found it telling that in our casual conversation, they mentioned the importance of data. And I feel confident that while we may not have everything that we could possibly want or need, we're certainly moving ahead in what I think would be the right direction in terms of data collection. And I do believe that we need to be willing to look at it sometimes differently and openly and consider impact, but also consider what would be helpful but meaningful. And I go back to the earlier comments that I made to Aaron. I am not the kind of person who is unwilling to admit that we did something we don't need to do. And if that ever comes up, we will step away from those requirements. But I think the data collection and the risk-based regulation process is one that is going to be quite beneficial to this college going forward. However, it may look in 5 years, it may look entirely different, which we need to be open to.
Yeah, completely agree.
Madam Chair, you are muted.
Thank you. Thanks, Maria. I appreciated your question. And as Andrew pointed out, your data expertise field certainly was beneficial and insight into this. So thank you. And anyone else with a question for Andrew on the operational plan? Okay. Thank you, Andrew, for presenting the operational plan. The council appreciates your prioritization of the college's mandate to protect the public interest and of course all the effort and time that went into preparing that plan and walking us through it today. So thank you. May I have a motion to accept the operational plan for 2026 to 2027 as presented? Paul first, Amy second. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. The motion is carried. Okay. Item 6.2, the capital operating budgets for 2026 to 2027 can be found beginning on page 178 of part 1 of your meeting package. At this time, I would like to invite Erica Logalies, our Deputy CEO of Registrant and Corporate Services, back to present the draft capital and operating budgets for the fiscal year of 2026 to 2027. Erica?
Thanks, Brenda. Another PowerPoint presentation. So today's presentation will focus solely on the budget for the 2026 fiscal year, and we'll break down our activities by program area. When you're looking at the budget documents in your package, it's important to remember that while 2 additional years of budget assumptions are presented to you, these are estimates provided for planning purposes only and are subject to change. In terms of sorry, go back one slide there, Monica. Thank you. Historically, the college has taken a worst case scenario approach to our budgeting process. This year, instead, we examined the last 5 years of data and based our budget assumptions on trends and experiences. Looking at our revenue, so while total revenue is approximately $4.9 million, $470,000 of that will be transferred to the college reserves, leaving operations with a revenue of about $4,481,186. Looking at our expenses, so operating expenses are the expenses the college intends to incur in the fiscal year across all program areas, with the exception of depreciation and bad debt in the amount of $64,232, which are considered non-cash expenses. Just for reference, depreciation is not a realized expense, but rather reflects the reduction in capital expenses value over time due to wear, tear, or obsolescence. Bad debt are booked revenues that will potentially or likely not be realized. When we look at our operating revenues over expenses, so when you combine the operating capital expenses over the operating revenue, the college has a sustainable budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Turning to our capital budget, this is allocating money for the acquisition or maintenance of fixed assets. A capital budget represents purchases that are added to the college's asset list and are depreciated over a defined period of time. Typically, that's 3 years. This year, the college has allocated $8,800 for the replacement of computer equipment and $1,000 for replacing any defective office equipment. This constitutes about a 25% reduction of cost over the last fiscal year. Turning to our council and committees, these are non-revenue generating. Council and statutory committees must meet to perform regulatory functions. Our non-statutory committees are needed to support regulatory programs in our council. There's approximately 70 meetings of council and committees are held each year, of which 20% are a full day. All meetings are conducted virtually with the exception of 1.5 full days for an in-person council training and regular business meeting. Our line item for consultants in this area represents our council and committee evaluation process for the year, and our program costs are budgeted at $166,573. For hearings, estimates are based on the number of matters before the ICRC that we expect to be referred to the discipline committee or fitness to practice. For reference, it generally takes about 1 year from the date of an ICRC referral to the scheduling of a discipline hearing, sometimes less for uncontested matters. There are no fitness to practice hearings anticipated for this next fiscal. However, we do have one uncontested discipline hearing, which was included in the budget. Revenue for this program area is only if panels order costs, which is at their discretion, and/or if there's an outcome that requires monitoring. Our budgeted revenue for the program is $11,674, but again, these funds are not guaranteed as it does not oblige a panel to order cost or make an order that requires monitoring. Expenses for the program are budgeted at $44,745, with net results at $33,071. Looking at complaints and reports, this has been budgeted conservatively based on 18 new investigations. With changes to Schedule 3 of the bylaws, this program area may generate a small amount of revenue just related to monitoring fees. However, this is dependent on the ICRC outcomes and it's not guaranteed. Expenses for this program area relate primarily to investigators, that's your consultant line, and legal fees, both of which are very essential to this process. Net results for the program are $205,650. For operations, this includes our facilities, our telephone, internet, software licenses, insurance, auditing fees, meeting infrastructure, and of course, our human resources. Revenue is interest and investment income at $83,071. In 2026, we do have a new revenue stream for administrative costs, which will cover costs associated with banking matters. It is important to note here that all college programs are supported by staff, that all staff costs associated with human resources are factored into operations. Staff resources for operations are set at approximately 64% of our overall expenses, which is not uncommon for a not-for-profit sector. Expenses for this area amount to $3,382,068, with a net result of $3,298,997. For our patient relations program, this is primarily designed to pay for counseling for patients, as well as increasing information and understanding of what sexual abuse is. Revenue in this program is any situation where a panel has ordered a registrant to pay back the college for funding for counseling. No revenue is expected next fiscal year. Budget expenses for this program area is $10,160, which relate to counseling and program costs, such as legal and translation, monies for which would come out of our patient relations reserve fund and not operations directly. For quality assurance, this program is mandated through the code and the quality assurance regulation. Our primary source of revenue for this program is when the Quality Assurance Committee orders a registrant to undergo an assessment, and 20 such assessments have been budgeted into this year. Per the bylaw changes, there will be some additional smaller program fees implemented this year to help mitigate administrative costs. Revenue for the program is budgeted at $28,750. Expenses of $45,930 are the cost of assessors, that's your per diem, travel and meal expenses, and legal fees as needed. The net result of this program would be $20,935. For registration, this includes our enter to practice and maintenance of registrants. Revenue relates to letters of standing, class change applications, resignations, life registration applications, initial registration fees, the annual registration fee, and reinstatements. Our revenue is booked at $4,148,795. Expenses of $17,097 relate to database programming for renewals, any legal fees and translation costs. Net result of the program is $131,698, which essentially funds most of our activities for the college. Looking at inspections, so this is mandated under Part 4 of the general regulation. Revenue for the program is $148,250, which is based primarily on 20 new premise inspections, 20 new premise registrations, and 27 existing premise inspections. Expenses of $31,324 include costs for inspectors. Again, that's your per diem, travel, and meal expenses, and any legal costs as needed. Budgeted net results for the program is $116,926. Our professional corporations program is mandated under the code. Budget revenue for this program is $141,337. That relies on application fees, issuance fees, and renewal fees. Budget expenses for the program is $1,450, and that relates to database programming changes and legal costs as needed. Net results for the program are $139,887. For examinations, this includes our entry to practice examinations as required under the registration regulation, as well as post-registration exams related to the standards of practice for IVIT and therapeutic prescribing. Budget revenues are $395,310, relate to exam registration fees and admin fees. Budget expenses for the program are at $241,351, are for psychometric services, examiner costs such as per diems and travel, supplies, room rental, and license fees. Net results is $153,959. Looking at public education and engagement, so this includes our In Conversation With series, the website, our social media, external communication support, and our membership with CANRA. No revenue is earned for this program. Budget expenses total $191,465. However, approximately 42% of that are fees paid to CANRA. Our standards program oversees development and maintenance of the college's standards of practice and practice guidelines. Again, there is no revenue generated for this program. Budget expenses of $1,680 relate to translation costs for the amended standards. Looking at risk, so this supports two different risk-oriented efforts, our enterprise risk management and risk-based regulation. Again, neither of these generate any revenue. Budget expenses of $900 relate to legal costs as needed. For a health and safety program, so this is mandated under the Ontario Health and Safety legislation. Under this legislation, organizations must develop this program to varying degrees based on their number of workers. Just for reference, worker is a broader term that applies to more than just employees and does include volunteers. As a result, our workforce is well over 150 individuals. This program is also non-revenue generating. Budgeted expenses relate to worker training, supplies, and committee costs, with a net result for the program of $3,783. Our regulatory education program was created in support of the Council's strategic plan and its emphasis on educating the profession and the public. Under this program, 6 education webinars are run annually. In 2026, there is a small budgeted revenue for the program of $750, and that relates to admin costs. Budget expenses for the program were $4,356, the majority of which are fees paid to our presenters. Net result for the program is $3,606. Finally, our volunteer program. So this oversees the entire volunteer base of the college, from recruitment, assessment, assignment, training, feedback, evaluation, and recognition. Again, there is no revenue generated for this program. Budgeted expenses relate to recruitment, training, recognition, and program translation costs, with a net result for the program of $5,078. So big picture, again, our total revenues are approximately budgeted at $4.9 million, with $470,000 of that going to reserve. Budget expenses are $4.4 million. And again, we've provided a breakdown just to allow you to see the various percentages that make up revenues and expenses. With all of that being said, I will open up to any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Erica. You're becoming more and more like an accountant every time I hear you speak. Very impressive. And to that note, our very own in-house CPA has a question for you. Not in-house, council member CPA. Dean, go ahead.
Erica, the revenues that you expect to generate in the next budget year, they appear to be optimistic in my view. I understand that half of it, or about $500,000, is going into the reserve fund, but the remainder seems like it's quite the challenge. Can you talk about it a little bit, where the additional money is going to be coming from?
Well, partially, again, were amendments made to Schedule 3 of the bylaws as approved by council. So there will be some program increases with respect to things like examination fees, professional corporation fees, for example. Some of the smaller admin fees, I don't think will be making up too much of the revenue, but again, those larger changes to Schedule 3 would bolster that revenue. Again, our projections are based on sort of our experiences to date and sort of 5 years worth of data. So I think they're pretty conservative with respect to what we're anticipating.
The program, the increased fees for the programs, do you have a ballpark what the dollar value would be over what it was last year?
I don't, unfortunately. I'll invite any other members of our senior management team that were here that want to speak to any of that, but I don't have that offhand, team.
No, I appreciate that. I still come up a little bit short because I understand that there probably be a few more registrants. We have an inflationary increases. We have program fees that could account for the larger portion of it, but I still come a little bit short by about $100,000 or maybe 150. It's not a big number, but still, putting it out there that it is a bit on the optimistic side. So if we do experience a shortfall in that, will we realize quickly or not?
Well, the majority, again, of our fees are generally realized in the first quarter with our renewal. So I think we'd probably be trending in that direction, seeing how things are going. We do obviously bring forward our quarterly reports to council. So that does give us sort of a litmus test of where we are at throughout the year. That's looked at by our Finance, Audit and Risk Committee as well. And then generally our Q3 projections, or Q3 report, we give our Q4 projections. So that would be when we kind of have that sort of solidified idea of what the end of the year will look like in terms of how we've fared.
Okay, no, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you. Amy, your question.
Yeah, could you clarify for me the legal fees in 2026 to 2027 versus the following years jump drastically? So 2026, I think it was 40 and it's up to 205. Is there a reason for that? Like, are we looking at there being a lot of complaints and discipline in upcoming hearings, or is that just preparing for worst case scenario?
I'll invite Jeremy to speak to that one.
Yes, Jeremy's ready to answer that question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and you know what, and that's an excellent catch. And so what we're doing, and this is exactly what Erica was talking about, is that we're looking at what, especially when it comes to complaints and discipline. So what do we currently have in process right now, and knowing that timeline for when it would actually result in, let's say, a referral or an actual hearing. And so that's exactly why some of that increase is there, is that we are anticipating if a matter is being reviewed right now, let's say it's with ICRC, and we're thinking it's looking like it might be referred, maybe it's still going to be another 6 months or so till it's referred. It really isn't even going to hit our discipline budget for another year after that, let's say. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of that jump in there, is because we are anticipating more discipline potentially the year after than this current year, looking at what we have already in place right now. So it's an excellent question, and it's exactly what we're trying to do, is really kind of being more, instead of just constantly looking at like, oh, we're gonna have 3 contested hearings, actually looking at what we have and considering whether it might be contested or not, and really looking at kind of what that timing is realistically showing us.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeremy. I think Andrew's also going to speak to that.
Yeah, just quickly, and not just about legal fees. And one of the reasons why you'll see jumps from the budget year to the estimate years is because we're looking ahead at what kind of activities we are going to need to undertake in that time frame. And the one that certainly jumps to my mind is looking at our database and our systems, knowing that they've become, they're now, almost 7, 8 years old by that point, knowing that the market's changing, technology is changing, our needs are changing, and there's stuff that we're not getting out from our data that we need. So planning that, are there things that we need to do that are going to be what I call big ticket projects? And so part of our thinking here is, what might we have done this year that we need to defer to next year? What new things are coming up next year or the following year? And what are the issues that we can potentially forecast as coming on our plate? Next year, when we come in the budget, some of those questions will have been answered, and you may not see them in an actual budget. But we're really trying to look at what is coming down the pike in terms of whether it's discipline or our college, our administrative, our operations, so that we've really given it to use the naturopathic phrasing, a holistic approach to what's happening, not just numbers.
Thank you, Amy. I assume that answered your question. Excellent. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Erica on her capital and operating budget? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you, Erica, for walking us through that. I really noted and appreciate that having our senior leadership team who have been with the college for so many years have the experience of, okay, what has actually happened over the years, and so that there is a solid foundation to where these numbers come from as to, with your projection. So I definitely noted and appreciate that. May I have a motion to accept the draft capital and operating budgets for fiscal year 2026 to 2027 as presented? Dean, thank you. May I have a second? Aaron, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Motion is carried. Okay. The briefing for item 6.3 can be found beginning on page 187 of part 1 of your meeting materials. And then the feedback that was received from the consultation is part 2 of your meeting materials. So at this time, I would like to invite Jeremy Cannell, our Deputy CEO of Regulation, to present the proposed amendment to Table 3 of the General Regulation of the Naturopathy Act regarding oral micronized progesterone.
Thank you, Brenda. I don't have a fancy PowerPoint presentation like Erica, so you're just going to have to, I know, such a disappointment. So I'll just give you a brief summary. I'm sure you've read all of this in great detail. I'm sure you're all very interested. So at our last meeting in December, or in the meeting in December, I guess, the council reviewed the initial consultation feedback. Now, that initial consultation was about the addition of OMP, but with a limitation in there. And at your last meeting, you did, or at the December meeting, sorry, you did look at that and also received a presentation about off-label prescribing, risks, kind of benefit. How does this work? What are some of the considerations to be made? And in considering all that feedback, looking at that presentation and kind of considering everything, you actually made the determination that you wanted to remove the limitation and then go out for another consultation, a subsequent consultation, especially because that would probably be considered a substantive change, so it would require that kind of additional consultation. So we initiated that consultation on your behalf, and this was really, it's the exact same kind of consultation, it just removed that limitation there, so that the OMP, the proposal then was that OMP would be available with no limitation listed. Consultation closed on March 4th, and we put together all that feedback. Like Brenda said, it's all included there in your package. We received feedback from a total of 179 individuals, groups, and really everyone that did respond was in support of the addition of OMP, and really with the removal of that limitation. So at this stage, for you, it's kind of in your hands now about how you wish to proceed. Looking at the materials that you've previously received, the new consultation feedback, all the information that's kind of available, you kind of need to at this point, make a decision about whether you wish to proceed with submitting to the government a regulation amendment to add OMP to Table 3 of the regulation, either with the limitation or without the limitation, as you've kind of consulted on. And then based on that, we'll kind of take some next steps staff-wise, and we will walk you through that. So I'll kind of stop there. Maybe I'll turn it back to you, Brenda, if there are questions or discussions before we kind of go into the next stage of this process.
Thank you, Jeremy. Are there any questions for Jeremy? I see a finger, Erin. I think she's trying to raise her hand. Erin, go ahead.
Reading through the feedback, it seemed like, and like you said, it was universally positive and in support of, unless there was anything that I missed. Did we get any feedback from other stakeholders? Like I saw all NDs and patients and some nurse practitioners, but was there anything else in there that was like interesting, relevant?
That's a great item that you noted. And Andrew and I both, I think we were talking about it the other day. We did note that we did not receive any consultation feedback from any of the other kind of regulated professions or associations. Specifically, I'm thinking of the OMA or anything like that. So it is of note. But it is public consultation. There is no obligation to do so. And just for you to know, kind of process-wise. So let's say we do proceed, we submit this to the ministry, they go through their process. Prior to the ministry will run a public consultation as well. In the past, when that has happened, you might see different stakeholders providing feedback at that time. So that is an option, but there is likely, going to be one more consultation, which is done by the Ministry of Health, if they decide to proceed with it. So it's a good note, but at this point, all we can do is kind of make it available. Whether individuals choose to provide that feedback or not is really at their discretion. So, yeah.
Would the information from this consultation get presented to the ministry so that we don't necessarily have to ask our supportive member or anyone in support to provide more support again?
Yeah, so we provide everything. So
Okay.
So what happens is following kind of any decision you will make, the staff will go away and we create it's in essence a regulation submission. The Ministry of Health has certain information that they want. Part of it is copies of all of the stakeholder feedback. When was consultation held? What are the impacts? Everything. So we provide absolutely everything to the Ministry of Health. And then after the fact, when they're doing their process, we're also here to help guide, answer questions. How does it impact naturopathic practice? Those kind of specific situations. But especially with the interest of transparency, we provide everything. So they'll get a copy of these briefing notes that we've given you, everything.
Thank you. Great question, Aaron. Further to that, Jeremy, do we include any of the feedback from the first consultation?
Yeah, and so this is a little bit of a unique situation. I don't think we've done this. Maybe we've done it once before, but there was pre-proclamation where we've had multiple consultations on an item. So again, like I said to Aaron, what we'd have here, this briefing kind of outlines that whole process, both processes of what we've done. So we'd actually provide all consultation from the first consultation, all feedback from the first consultation. We would provide all of the information that was also provided from our independent expert, including that presentation that was provided to you and was available for consultation, all of that, and all the information from the secondary consultation as well. So it's kind of an open book. We give them everything. Yeah, okay. From the whole process, kind of from start to finish, where it came from, when it was originally submitted. We'd even probably go back a little further, probably back to, we will address items from back in, going to say, what was it, 2019, when we did an original submission that did include OMP and addressing some of those concerns as well. So that it's a very fulsome document that we will kind of be covering years and years of information.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that you even are going back to the original one, which the ministry declined.
That's right. Yeah, because there's going to be items that we need to address there, and I think it'll be important for us to be able to outline how things have changed over the years. And I think Jamie, Dr. Keller, was excellent in her report in providing a number of those things, but also how we plan on regulating this going forward as well. I think it's important to address a number of those concerns.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Jeremy, I have one more if I may. Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
No, Madam Chair, please ask your question. I kind of want to bridge us into the next part of the process. So,
okay. So my other question is regarding the risk. If the ministry were to decline this submission, and how does that affect us or the college? I mean, both reputationally, but also for future submissions. Is there an impact?
That's a really good question. The ministry is going to do what the ministry is going to do. We don't have, kind of control over the decisions they're going to make. I think for us, really what we would want to consider, and as if the ministry comes back to us and says, you know what, we're not going to proceed with this at this time, and here is why. For us, it's about making sure that we acknowledge that, we respect that, and then we look at that for any future submissions. So I think that they did that back in with our submission back in 2019, and they came back and said, well, here's what we aren't going to proceed with, and here's why. And we took that to heart. We really went through that in great detail. And so this submission that we are doing now is really addressing a number of those items that they talked about, really patient safety, those kind of items. So reputational risk, I of course, maybe a little bit, but I think this is a very thoughtful process that we are following. We've also been in communication with the Ministry of Health. This isn't a shock that this is coming. They know the process that we've been following. So I think that, we have been kind of very systematic in how we have gone about this process, having those conversations. What would you need? What should we consider? How can we go about this, especially looking at that independent review? So I think this is just kind of that process of looking at things that are needed, especially for patient safety purposes, right? And things that might be necessary out there. So, yeah.
So I think you just called on me, but you're muted, Brenda.
Thank you.
So actually, I'll start there, if I may. So the ministry is a system partner, but they also have the privilege or the task or the challenge of regulating the entire system. So if the ministry were to decide not to proceed, notwithstanding that the council might approve this and submit it, I don't think it should be interpreted as a damage to our reputation, provided we fulfilled our responsibilities as a council, and that you've given due consideration to the public interest, to patient safety, and that you know what you're asking and why you're asking it. So I wouldn't want us to look at a negative decision as being one that, we did something wrong, or because I think what we're providing to you today and over the prior meeting is to give you information for you to make an informed decision in the public interest. And that's sort of where I actually wanted to begin to speak to the next step of this process, not for you, but for us as an organization, and we submit this to the ministry. And looking at the kinds of questions that the ministry is likely to come back to, Jeremy really talked to one of those, which was what's changed from 2019 to now that we can address. And if we go back to some of those questions, some of their questions were around being unclear about monitoring in terms of the impact on patients. And we think we have some answers to that. And we think that the current lab regulation allows our registrants to monitor OMP in its impact on their patients. But those are the kinds of questions that we're going to need to address either directly in our submission. Once we make the submission, we go through a fairly lengthy process of interaction with the ministry. They'll look at it, they'll come back with questions, they'll look at the answers, they'll come back with more questions. That's the process. And there's nothing untoward going on there. That is just, they need to do their full workup of what's being proposed. I think the other question we'll likely get from the ministry is, in the council's view, is this considered, in your view, a change in scope of practice to the profession? Are you expanding the scope by authorizing OMP to the naturopathic profession? And I think it could be argued that it is a change in scope or an expansion in scope, because we're adding a new drug to the list of drugs that can be prescribed. And we're adding a drug that can actually impact a patient systemically, as opposed to already being authorized to use topical or suppositories, which are deemed local and not systemic. So, and that actually came up in part of the letter in 2019. So we're anticipating that will be one of the areas of discussion with the ministry. On the other hand, it could be argued this is not a scope change or expansion whatsoever. The regulation already empowers naturopathic doctors to treat women in menopause through topical estrogen and progesterone and suppositories. So this is just them, continuing to service a patient base that they already have and who are already in need and interacting with our registrants. OMP also has a much better safety profile and is more effective. So we're enabling, in fact, better patient outcomes. And that represents a significant public interest. Better outcomes is in the public interest. So that's one of your deliberations. And I raised that because we had this kind of a conversation around the lab tests, but you need to also have this kind of thought process in your mind and what is this doing in terms of what the scope is of for the profession. And I want to be very clear. I am not suggesting that the council should interpret it one way or the other, nor am I particularly speaking to saying I oppose this particular edition. In fact, I do not. But wherever you may land on, is this a scope change or expansion? I think you need to have considered that. And I think that needs to be part of your dialogue of why are you landing where you landed? Is this because of patient safety? And what would you do in other situations where other drugs are brought forward to us, new drugs to be added? You have to be able to bring the scope of practice equation into it so that you understand if the rationale for this addition is patient safety and patient efficacy, then that's why you're doing this. You're not doing this because you want to alter the scope of practice, and that's not your intent. And I think that's what the ministry is going to want to hear from you, from us on your behalf. What did you think? For you, what is the deciding factor in either moving forward or not in this situation? Is it because you want to expand scope, or is it because of some other factors? And is this actually an expansion of scope, or in your view, is it not? And those should be some of the things that you think about in terms of as you now move forward into your decision-making process, what's at issue here? And we want to make sure that we can articulate that to the ministry on your behalf.
Thank you, Andrew. I hadn't thought about it in terms of that. And it would be really great if we had a presentation to council about scope at some point, just to rein that in so we're all clear. Just putting a bug in your ear. Yeah.
It's already ready. That's part of our May training, and I'm actually quite excited about it.
Great. Just so that all council members really have a clear understanding of the boundaries of scope and what does that mean? That'll be great. Okay, Jacob, I see you with your physical hand up. Is that a motion?
No, actually, I put up a virtual hand, but then my virtual hand got erased. But
that was
anyway.
Applause.
You didn't, yeah.
Applause. Okay, so I'm up. Okay, so it sounds like scope. If it is deemed to, they're interpreting that they want to change, that we may want to change scope. It sounds like that's a greater obstacle than just doing it for the benefit of the public. But I don't know. You want to maybe address that, Andrew, or just to make it clear in my mind?
Scopes of practice of the professions are set by the ministry, and they establish those based on consultations with the professions themselves and with the regulators of the professions. So there is always a concern. I've been here with you for 15 years, and during those 15 years, I've heard millions of times comments from the ministry up to the ADM level that what we don't want to see are backing into scope change or scope expansion. If a profession wishes to change its scope, it needs to approach that head on and go to the ministry and explain what scope change they're anticipating and why, and address all of those issues with the ministry. at some point, either the ministry will ask them or will come to us and say, if this scope change were made, how would you regulate this change in scope? But essentially, scope doesn't change because one individual wants it to change or one group wants to change. Scope is directed by ministry, and they set that, and they have a notion of what the scopes are. And yes, they are overlapping in many ways for many professions, but they don't want to go into a scope change inadvertently, as an unintended consequence. It's a planned approach. So changes that we've seen in scope around pharmacists, for example, were not unplanned. They were talked about. It was intentionally moved in that direction for good and clear reasons in the ministry's mind. So again, if the profession, and I know this profession very, very much wants to change its scope, that is something that needs to be worked through with the ministry and engaging with us when it's appropriate to do so. But the question is, what is the change in scope, and what will the ministry need to be satisfied that scope is in the public interest and that patient outcomes are enhanced and patient safety is protected? So we're the patient safety. Patient outcomes is everybody's responsibility, but changing scope is a ministry responsibility.
Good. Thank you, Andrew. You answered that. Thanks.
Andrew, just to clarify that I heard you correctly. So if the profession wanted to change the scope, that's not something the college goes to the ministry and says, we want to expand the scope of naturopaths? That's just something we respond if the ministry says to the college, if we expand the scope, how would you regulate it?
So the ministry actually has a process for scope change, and there's actually a fair amount of debate and discussion about exactly what it means, because it's not always abundantly clear. But the ministry would anticipate that a profession who wishes to have a scope change, and it usually it's an expansion or addition to the scope, would approach the ministry and talk about what that scope change would be, why that scope change is necessary or beneficial to Ontarians and to the healthcare system. And once the ministry is of the view that says, okay, we're interested in considering this, proceed and now engage with the college to see what the college's perspective is on that scope change, whether that can be accommodated within the current regulatory framework, or is there additional regulatory elements or components that are needed. And so there will be a process that the people who are proposing a scope change would need to engage with the college. But we would only do that once we have an acknowledgement from the ministry that, in fact, they're interested in certainly considering it to some degree. Without that, yes, we have, a green or a cautionary light to proceed. There's no value in us weighing in on it, because if the red light is there, it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Erin, before I get to your question, I think Rebecca wanted to speak to this item as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really buttress, and as usual, your CEO sort of anticipated what I was going to say. In my experience, scope expansion, because I've rarely seen a scope reduction, a professional scope expansion is usually triggered by an association, a professional association. It is rarely, it's not unprecedented, but more often than not, it's usually initiated by an association. And then, as you've heard from your CEO, the ministry will quite readily and quickly turn the regulator of that profession and say, okay, let's hear it, let's talk. That's not set in stone, but from a like anecdotal, I'm doing what we shouldn't be doing. I'm not putting data before you, but anecdotally, my experience is that it's usually initiated more by the profession and through its association. But I really just want to drive home what your CEO said about the intent. Quite clearly, there are a lot of situations where it's quite appropriate from the public interest for a profession's scope, whether that's through drugs, acts, so be it title, to be expanded, because it is in the public interest. And so when a regulator requests it, that's not problematic if, and to use the term your CEO used, if the intent of that request is rooted in the public interest, if the intent of it is creeping into professional advocacy, if it is creeping into turf protection, that is when the regulator has veered outside of its lane. And from a reputational perspective, in an earlier question, that is sometimes when a regulator does risk its reputation vis-a-vis the ministry and others, if it has lost that sort of north star of public protection. So in summary, usually it's not always, but usually it's initiated by a profession, and B, it's not problematic for a profession, a regulator to seek this, but it has to be grounded in that public interest mindset. Thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. That's excellent. Thank you. Aaron, you still have a question? Go ahead.
I don't know if I still have a question. Let's see if I'm coherent here. Because I think that I think Rebecca just came around to me figuring this out. Because I was gonna say that it seems unfair, like as far as, well, how do we view this? Scope expansion or not scope expansion? This comes down to like a bit of a semantics game, it feels like, especially since this is like such a great example, and maybe the only example I can think of that is clearly in the interest of public safety. Like there's such clear evidence for NDs can do this one thing, but don't have access to do a safety monitoring thing. So we should be able to do this other thing. So like, it's like we're asking for something that is very clearly aligned with public safety, but I don't want us to look like we're trying to back into scope expansion on the, like by piggybacking on public safety. Did I ask a question? I don't know.
Great point, Aaron. I think you did, and Andrew, I think, is ready to speak to that.
Great.
I actually look at what you said as a summarizing comment, and you said a couple of things that are important. One is that this is one example, and you can't think of any other examples where, in fact, the public interest and patient safety is paramount. So if that is the rationale for us approving the addition of OMP, that your intent is clearly vested in patient safety and public protection, we just need to articulate that to the ministry, because that's why you want to make this decision. You know what? Any decision you make may back into, as you said, I loved it, you may back into inadvertent scope expansion. Again, now we're going to talk about to what degree and so on and so forth. And again, there's arguments very clear here that this is very much within the work that the profession does. So it's not bringing in a whole new set of patients. You're dealing with an existing patient base, and you're ensuring they get access to the right care in a timely way, and it's an effective care. It puts the patient first. You've just made the very argument that we would make to the ministry, saying why you want to approve this. It may inadvertently be seen to be an expansion of scope, but that's not our priority. Our priority here is patient safety, patient efficacy, and public protection. And if that's your decision, then that's what we would articulate to the ministry.
And that's what I want to do, only someone should word it better than how I worded it.
Thank you, Aaron.
I think, Aaron, if I may, I apologize, Madam Chair. It's as people are apt to do. I don't want us to put the cart before the horse. The question for council is why we've heard from our stakeholders. Definitely heard from the profession of the importance of this to treating their patients effectively. So you have what I would suggest is the public interest data within what we've heard from people, and certainly what Jamie has put forward. I think what the issue is, or the question for council is are we all understanding and agreeing that that's why we're proceeding? And if you're going to proceed, then that's why. It's not about it's not about scope, it's about patient safety, patient effectiveness, and efficacy. And I'm not suggesting that needs to be an emotion. I want to be clear. It's just that we need to articulate from council that the reason you're doing this is X, and therefore, when we vote, there's an understanding amongst everybody who's going to vote that this is the basis for which we're doing this. I want everyone to be clear before you vote today of why we're doing this.
Thank you. So I am contemplating whether a poll would be a good idea to capture everybody's thoughts. And what I'm going to do is, if I can ask Monica to do a high five poll for me, that's the quickest. And what we'll do is 5 will be presented as this is not scope expansion, as Andrew and Jeremy have both explained, and Aaron also commented on. And 1 being, no, we are thinking we want this as scope expansion. Okay, so high five if you want to put this forward as not scope expansion, merely in public interest and patient safety, you'll choose 5. If you want this to be put forward as scope expansion, please indicate number 1, and then you're welcome to indicate anything in the middle or in the range there. Jacob, are you having difficulty with the poll?
No, I just have one needs some clarification.
Absolutely.
Okay. I guess it goes back to my first comment about if it is a scope thing we're looking at, like, is that so bad? And why wouldn't we? Or are we saying it's not scope because we know it'll be easier for the ministry to pass it as being a non-scope?
If I
And
may, you're telling us why you think this change is important. And if you think this change is important because it expands scope, you would select 1. If you think this change is important because it's about patient safety and patient outcomes, you're going to select 5. I see a couple people selected 4. I suspect that is likely because, as in every decision in this area that we make, whether it's drugs or labs, a decision in patient safety still may have an impact on scope. And I think that's clearly what's going to be happening here, is that I can enunciate a couple of arguments about why this would be a scope change, even though that's not your intent. This is about what your intent is, and what's persuasive to you here as a council. And what's I'm seeing in the numbers, we're seeing. Has this been shared, Monica?
No.
Can you share the results? Thank you. So what you're seeing here is 9 out of 11 council members have said that this is, in their view, about patient safety. 2 people have said, well, it's that, but slightly less than that. And I think that's because you can't help the fact that it is adding a new drug. And it's adding a drug, and it's not only adding a drug, it's adding a drug that approaches systemically rather than locally. And that's the reality. So it's never going to be, yes, this is only about patient safety. Of course, there's going to be an impact on scope. But that's not the question here. Really is, what is your intent? And I just want it to be clear that your intent here is, and it seems to be clear that your intent is that you're focusing on the expert reviewer who explained to you how this approach, how this drug was important for patient safety and patient outcomes, and that the risks were low, and that it didn't need physician co-management. It could be incorporated readily into naturopathic practice. Those are important arguments, and those are the arguments that I believe you seem to be emphasizing on.
Thank you, Andrew. Dean, you have a question?
Yes. No, mine is more of a statement. I believe that it was a good idea to proceed. It was you guys that told me it was a scope problem. So that's my honest answer. I'm a number 5. And honestly, no, it was you guys that told me we were going out of scope. So I did not request this as a matter of expansion of scope.
Good to know.
Thank you, Dean. Any other comments or questions? Jacob, please learn to use it. Learn to use the button. Click the
Alright,
heart.
Okay, I'm gonna practice.
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
Click the heart, not the arrow.
I
Click
clicked the heart.
Now raise hand. It's second from the bottom.
That's applause. Okay, so forget
Yes.
about that one. Raise hand. Why didn't you say so in the first place,
Brilliant.
or the second place?
Okay, Jacob, go ahead.
Okay, so okay, now I'm more confused. That's nothing new, but what would the positive side of it being to make it a scope issue? Because all I'm hearing is negative so far, but I think there's some positiveness to it. Has that crept into
What's the
your thought
positiveness?
Well, that it becomes part of our practice, that it is actual an advancement of our progress and how naturopaths can practice in Ontario.
Whose interests is that?
It's in the profession's interest.
Correct. And what does that tell you?
Well, I don't think it tells me anything really. I think our profession wants to advance in all aspects.
Is that the job of the council, though, Jacob, to
Oh.
advance the profession's interests? Is that the job of the council of the college? Is that our role?
No.
Thank you. So but that's the explanation, Jacob. There's nothing wrong with advancing the interests of the profession. Someone has to do it. It's just not the role of the College of Naturopaths, the regulatory authority, to advance the profession's interests. It's our role to advance the public interest. There's a profession whose role it is to advance the profession's interests. And it's not a bad thing that they do that. That someone has to do it. And Rebecca kind of referred to this, and I see her hands up, it's about your lane. Our lane is not looking at the profession's interest. Our lane is looking at the public interest and patient safety.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. All right.
But
as being an ND, so I have to take off my, in essence, I have to take off my ND hat, because it is my bias, since I would think with me and all the NDs on this panel to think for the profession. But I get it. Just I have to,
But as an elected representative, when you are elected because you are seen to be the best person to look at the public interest above profession's interests. So by your very nature of being put onto this council by election, you are putting the patient and public interest above and ahead of both profession interests and personal interests, including your personal biases. And that's not for Jacob. That's for all of the elected professional members to this council. When you're elected because you are seen to be someone who can put the public interest ahead of the professions or your own.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that reminder, and that's good. It's good for me, and I guess for all the other NDs on this panel. Okay. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Jacob. Now, the same way you raised your hand, you're going to lower your hand. Click the heart and click lower hand. And I will let Rebecca go next. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Really quickly, again, just to respond to Jacob's question. There is, if the expansion of a scope of a profession is in the public interest, and that can be actually true, that's a positive. The fact that a profession and the public both benefit, in this case, over an expansion does exist. These are not Manichaean. These are not polar opposites. There can be sometimes an overlap between the profession and public interest. Not always, but back to what your CEO said. If the intent of any decision to increase scope, to bring new titles, to do anything is rooted in your ability to protect the public, that's it. You're in your lane. You have justified it. Whether or not it also benefits the profession, that's not your primary motivator. Your primary motivator is the public. So don't be worried that you can't vote for something that is in that advances or is beneficial to the profession. That's neither here nor there. Sometimes it'll happen. Sometimes the opposite will happen. Sometimes it won't be what the profession wants. But the prime motor, the intent, as your CEO said, that North Star has to be the public interest. And if you feel that that is not, in fact, the case, that's a flag that either this isn't the right decision, or that's a flag. And again, I'm not trying to pick out Jacob, but for everyone, especially the professional members, if you understandably can't take off your profession hat, if you have an interest, a conflict, because you're all the regulatory makeup is such that, of course, you, in this case, naturopaths who are here, this would impact you. That in of itself is not a conflict. Okay, but it's if you can't take off your ND hat, because you right here, yes, you're NDs, but you're primarily directors of a regulator of NDs. If you can't take off that, if you're more motivated by the professional interest as opposed to public, that's a flag that you might be in conflict and you'd want to step aside. So, big governance training here whatsoever, but just remember, if your North Star and your motivator and your intent in all of your decisions and all your deliberations is the public interest, you're good.
Thanks, Erica. Lisa, go ahead.
Hello. I would like to bring up something that really helped me, and it was Dr. Amy Armstrong last year at the May meeting when this first came up, and I turned to her afterwards and I said, "Oh, can you explain to me as a public member why this is so important? This addition, either with limitations or without limitations." And I don't know, Amy, do you remember how you answered me? Because you made it very that this is something that you've always been doing. And so this, to me, is, if we want to talk scope, treating women with hormonal issues is something that I think naturopathic doctors have been doing all along. So now we find out that there is, a drug that helps. This is helping the public. And if it helps the profession, like, our counsel just said, well, then that's a great thing. But at this moment in time, I'm thinking about the public, and I'm thinking if there's a drug out there that is going to help 50% of people in this world, then I don't see there being a reason that naturopathic doctors shouldn't be prescribing this. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for putting Amy on the spot. Made her look good.
Sorry, Amy.
Okay, I would like to hear from a couple more people before I go to we'll do a poll consensus. So we haven't heard from a few people yet. And before I call your name, would any of you like to comment or question? I'm going to list you. Felicia, Danny, and Naomi. Any questions? Anything you want to add? I think Paul, and maybe Paul. Okay, Felicia, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with kind of the poll that we did so far, in that I think this is very much in the public interest, and I think if it does advance the scope of the profession, however it's kind of perceived, I think that's just an added plus, that it serves the profession and the public. So yeah, I guess summary for me is that I agree. I think it's in the public interest.
Thanks, Felicia. Danny?
I definitely feel this is in the public interest, especially as I'm giving a presentation tomorrow night on menopause. And I've been doing a lot of research on that as well to update for a generalized population, not a naturopathic population. So I'm feeling very excited that this is something that is going to be available to the public. So those are my feelings.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Okay, Naomi, and I think Paul, either of you have any comments or questions you want to share?
I can just speak to it. I fully support the proposal. I was one of the people who had said 4, and Andrew expressed why very eloquently. So I won't, go over that whole explanation. I do think that this is in the public interest, but I know that it could have an impact on scope, even though that is not the intent, and that's not what council is doing here, and that's what made me sort of choose 4. But that doesn't mean that I don't support it, or and I do think that it's directed at the public interest.
Thanks, Naomi. Appreciate your insight and comment on that. Thank you. Paul, go ahead.
I agree that, and I used 5. I agree this is in the public interest, and I support undertaking anything that's in the public interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, Amy?
You just didn't catch that I didn't talk, so I'll call myself out.
You're right.
I put a 5, and I do think it has sort of the side benefit of maybe expanding scope. But the reason I picked 5 was because to me, it doesn't expand. It's in the public interest because it doesn't expand scope, because it's letting us use one of the drugs that we already have access to appropriately and safely, because we can't do that if we don't have OAMP. And so to me, it's sort of adding to what we already have to make sure that it's actually utilized safely for the public. So I don't think it expands scope necessarily. So that's why I picked 5.
Excellent point. Thank you. Paul, is that another question? Oh, no. Okay. Okay, so let's do a quick high 5 poll before we move to motion. And obviously 5 is going to be to approve this, to put it forward, and 1 is going to be not putting it forward. So Monica, there we go. Thank you. Okay, beautiful. We have consensus. Okay, so I have to say I personally found it quite refreshing that there were far less copy and pasted responses in this consultation. So that made for more support. Okay, so thank you, Jeremy, for taking the time to walk us through, and Andrew and Rebecca and everybody's insight into this. Appreciate it. Now for this vote, though, we are going to use a different movement. We're going to use our electronic raise hands, which is one of the reasons, Jacob, why I wanted to make sure you could do it. We need to do a count of the votes. So we're going to use our electronic raising hands, or our virtual hands. So may I have a motion? So just for the voting part, okay, for the initial motion, we don't need it yet. So first, may I have a motion to approve the proposed amendment to Table 3 of the general regulation by adding oral micronized progesterone with no limitations identified? Okay, Paul, I see first. Second is Amy. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your virtual hands. And hold them up there while staff do a count, please. Okay. And if you are not in favor, do not raise your virtual hand. And staff, let me know when you have the count.
Good.
All good? Okay,
Yep.
thank you. You can lower your hands. Okay, so that was great. That one is done. We're going to take a short 10-minute break before we resume. It is now 11:18. We'll resume at 11:28. And if Monica, you would be so kind as to put up a little clock. I'm going to ask that everyone please mute themselves, mute your microphones, and turn off your cameras while you're away, and we'll see you back here shortly.
Jeremy, I don't see your happy face at QAC anymore.
I know, I've been able to extricate myself since you're being so well taken care of.
Jeez.
It's nice to know you miss me, though.
I guess you're busy. Yeah.
Well, I'll probably be there shortly, probably at your next meeting, and we'll go through some policy items. So you'll get to see me again.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that last time I was at the meeting is that how are we doing on the automation of the...
Dean, I need to remind you, we are being broadcast live.
Sorry.
Thank you. Dean, is that a question?
Yes, I do actually, because I've been thinking about what Ms. Durkin said and what Jacob said, and I would like to sort of go back to some of it and what Andrew said and what some of the other people said about scope and my confusion attached to it. Do we have a minute now?
I'm going to ask if you don't mind, since Andrew did relay that in May at our training, we're going to talk about scope quite a bit, assuming quite a bit. Why don't we park your question or idea or jot it down and bring it up at that training?
Yeah, because I want to have a clear understanding of who's who and who's in the driving seat for that, because I'm very confused now on that, because I think that I was incorrect about what I thought the college's responsibilities lay, and that they lie in other places. And I think there's a lot of confusion out there. And I'm not the only one.
Okay, so if I can park that, and Andrew, I'm sure, has a mental note of that comment or question, and when we do our May training, we can discuss that further.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
And
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We have two program briefings on our agenda today. We need to get caught up a little bit to get onto our annual schedule. So the first educational briefing that we have can be found beginning on page 233, and it is on the inspection program. So I am going to invite Jeremy Cannell, our Deputy CEO, Regulation, to present this item.
Me again. Okay, so I'm not actually going to give a big in-depth review like I did for QA. So we are playing a little catch-up on our briefings, like Brenda said. So I will actually just, it's here, it's in your meeting package. I'll just kind of maybe, I'm sure you've read it in great detail, open it up. Do you have any questions, concerns, things you don't understand? I'll just kind of do a little bit of Q&A instead of a big presentation today.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to ask Jeremy the first question? I'm not seeing hands yet. Jeremy, maybe your briefing was just too thorough.
Everyone understands the program. It's great.
Okay. Oh,
no.
Andrew has a question.
Can you just very briefly speak to outcomes from inspections? Because I know the answer to this, but I want to make sure that the council understands, because when we present the regulatory operations report, the numbers of inspections that may have been undertaken don't necessarily match the number of outcomes. So can you speak to that? If someone passes with conditions, what happens then?
Yeah, so the way that the regulation works is that there is kind of two decisions that are made. So one is a preliminary decision. So an inspection occurs, the committee receives all the information, including feedback or additional information from the designated registrant. They'll look at that and they will make an initial, we'll call it a kind of preliminary decision. And the preliminary decision might be pass with conditions, meaning we're going to let you do this and we're going to pass, but there are certain things that need to be in place at all times. Okay. Now, that's a preliminary decision. That decision is provided to the designated registrant, who have an opportunity to, let's say, remedy any deficiencies that might be in place, or make any changes necessary. They would then submit that back or evidence of those changes back to the committee. The committee would review that along with, the new information, along with the previous information, and then they issue a final decision. And the final decision is taking everything into account, and that will become their final decision. Now, the final decision might be the exact same as the preliminary decision if there was no real information that changed. Or it could be that the information that was provided actually, explained a number of situations, or they have actually put certain things in place and they provided documentation to support that. So it might actually change into a full and complete pass with no conditions after that kind of preliminary review. And that process is written out in the regulation, in that it provides the committee an opportunity to say, so here's concerns. Now, there sometimes isn't. It might be a preliminary decision of pass with the final outcome of pass. But it does provide that opportunity to remedy any deficiencies, to make sure that they're fully compliant and everything is perfectly in place by the time that final decision is made. Does that answer your question? Is that what you were kind of looking for, that process there? Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Jeremy, for clarifying that. Now, anyone have any new questions as a result of what Jeremy just shared, or that they thought of in the meantime? Okay, well, Jeremy, thank you very much for presenting the inspection program briefing, or including in our package. And now we're going to move on to the next educational briefing, which is the registration program. This can be found beginning on page 237 of part 1 of your materials. And I am going to invite Erica Logalies, our Deputy CEO of Registrant and Corporate Services, to present this item.
Thanks, Brenda. I'm going to take a page from Jeremy's playbook and just also open it up to any questions that you might have. I know this program briefing has been provided previously. I think we've done a few minor updates to it, but happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone after reading the briefing? Any staff have any questions they want to feed to Erica? Okay. Well, looks like you're off the hook on questions as well, Erica. Thank you so much for including this briefing on the registration program, and also, again, making it so thorough and clear that everybody understood it right off. Okay, so the next piece, we are going to discuss personnel matters, and as such, council will move into an in-camera session in a breakout room. So at this time, I would like a motion that council moves to an in-camera session pursuant to paragraph D of section 7.2 of the Health Professions Procedural Code to discuss personnel matters. Denny, is that a motion or a question? Motion, thank you first. Okay, may I have a second? Dean, thank you. All those in favor, raise your hands, please. Okay, thank you. May I ask that we be moved to a breakout room?
I'm just trying to find the breakout rooms. Here we go.
Okay, I was going to say the only staff member we still have is Monica, but the others are joining us now. Okay, so that concludes our business. As there were no items moved from the consent agenda and nothing added, we can move on to the final portion of our meeting, which is our valuation. And in keeping with our new approach, we're going to conduct it together in the form of poll questions. So if you can take a few moments and answer the questions as posted in the poll on your screen. The lengthy one, I'll have to look at shortening it for future meetings. Are we doing Monica? Are we almost finished? I think we should have 11 responses, or 11 people responding. Thank you. Okay. And time could have been managed more effectively, came up as number 2. Would anyone like to share any thoughts or concerns on that one? If you don't wish to share today, you're welcome to email me and help me with chairing future meetings if I'm elected again for next year. Okay, I'll leave it to if someone wants to follow up. That seems to be the only one that stood out. Okay. And we can close that. Thank you. Okay. So our next meeting will be an in-person meeting on May 26 and 27 at the Toronto Marriott Hotel Markham. So it's in Markham, but it's called the Toronto Marriott. Tuesday will be a full day of training starting at 9 a.m. and ending around 4. And breakfast, snacks, lunch will be provided. Tuesday evening, I'll be hosting our dinner at the Draco Markham, which is in the hotel. Wednesday will be a half-day business meeting beginning at 9 and ending by noon, which will include our annual executive committee elections. And we'll also be welcoming at least one newly elected professional council member. Breakfast and snacks will be provided. However, as we often end earlier than noon, we have not arranged for lunch. So council members, if you wish to submit a claim for a lunch stipend, you can. So this concludes our business for today. Thank you, everyone, for your time, your contributions, excellent discussions, your commitment to act in the public interest today. As I mentioned earlier, Dean has recently been reappointed for another 3-year term, so congrats and thank you, Dean. Thank you to Andrew, Jeremy, Erica, Rebecca, and all the college staff for supporting and guiding council in its governance role. May I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting? First, Paul, may I have a second? Naomi, thank you. All those in favor, raise your hands. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned at 12:22 p.m. Enjoy the rest of your day, and professional members, don't forget to vote.